Welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, Chow, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about our favorite video games across different consoles and any special memories that we have about these different consoles when we owned them. And again, this started from a conversation I had at work, and we just started talking about how we grew up with video games and what video games were really significant to us over all the different consoles that we had. So I'm going to go through my sort of history of video games and consoles and that kind of stuff, and some stories about them, and and then basically, if you like, you can put your stories about these various different games. Do you agree with some of the games that are on the list? Do you also have a similar story? Put that in the comments below, and that'd be great. Before we begin, don't forget to go down below, click subscribe. I know about 60% of you are already subscribed, and I really appreciate that. And again, hopefully the other rest of you, I hope I've earned your subscription, and you go hit that red button, subscribe, and also maybe click that notification bell, because obviously YouTube is starting to get better on recommending my videos now. But for the mass majority, you won't know when I release videos until you get that notification ring. All right. I'm going to pull up the list of popular video games, and then I'm going to sort of go through them, as well as add my own stories and my own games as well. So you do that in the comments below for that too. All right. So without further delay, let's begin. Okay, so my next big system that I ended up picking up was the Turbografx or PC Engine. Now, I know at the time, a lot of people were sort of growing up with the, Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo. And again, when I think back of it, I think that, I had the most fun with the Sega Genesis. Though I really, really enjoyed the flexibility and the great number of games that the Super Nintendo had. Now, nothing really struck out to me as much as what I had with the Sega Genesis. But I think when sort of most kids were sort of growing up at this time, you had either the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. But I sort of came in there right in sort of the middle, where I hadn't done both. But what really sort of stood out was when I got the Turbografx. Now again, most we're the type that you either had one or the other, but I was one of the ones that sort of went and got them all, right. Turbografx for me was really a kind of a no-brainer choice, almost, as it were. I remember, since I worked at Radio Shack at the time, and Radio Shack was one of the very few places that you could also get a Turbografx. I remember, I always pitched that a lot. Now, of course, we sold lots of, Super Nintendos and that kind of stuff as well. But the big one was, of course, the Turbografx for me. And I remember, we had a display case, that we had set up with the game console and whatnot. And I'd always remember bringing in games to put in there, and it always had such great graphics and that kind of stuff, especially during the opening things. A lot of people kind of really that drew their attention to that. But yeah, the games I remember playing. I remember Splatterhouse, because I remember that was the favorite game that David, he was the guy who did that K sketch on Andrew's Cast. And of course, he's the guy who I got my Cantonese version of Orgus and Mospita from. But yeah, I remember he would sit there and he would play that game, and he's one of the few people who I've seen go and play the entire game through, and be able to complete all the levels and that kind of stuff. So I always I wasn't very good at that game. I mean, I liked how you ran around and you splat guys, but I mean, for the most part, I wasn't very good at that sort of thing. I think still my kind of groove was still like things like like Final Fight and that kind of stuff. Streets of Rage, for example, on the Sega Genesis. That's sort of my speed. I enjoyed sideways shooters like R-Type, because as I remember, even on the Apple and that kind of stuff, they didn't really make a really good version of that game. So on the Easy Engine, that was the game for me for that one. So I really liked that one. I think also that was when I first got really introduced into good role playing games. Ease was my favorite game on that one. And I think that one was really important because I didn't really get into things like Final Fantasy and that kind of stuff, or even like things like Zelda, even at that time. I played those, but what really struck me was how well Ease was done. And I think I was really getting into like things like Ultima and Wizardry and that kind of stuff. But so this one really clicked really well for me. I like the strategy game Military Madness. I remember I was so in depth. I even started drawing little maps and that kind of stuff of like how you do your opening move and how to maximize your movement and that kind of stuff. So that was really a big thing for me. In terms of puzzle games, I know that I was really, like I said, I was doing really, big things with columns and that kind of stuff, and Puyo Puyo for the other systems. But the one that really triggered me was Clax. It's just that the ability to move that kind of stuff, and that really interested me in just the progression of going through all the different levels. That was really big for me, and I know when I get into PlayStation, that was really helpful when I get into IQ. But yeah, Clax was a really big one for me. And then when I started getting into all the CD games and that kind of stuff, then that's what really started opening up my world for all the animation games, right? So when we went into and got the Turbo Duo, right, the next one, Radio Shack started getting that one, and then that's when I started bringing in all the CD games, and that was really good, because that's when I started bringing in the Japanese games and that kind of stuff. And unlike the future releases of this Super Nintendo and the PlayStation, the PC Engine and that kind of stuff was not regionally locked, right? So you could play Japanese games on the Turbografx Duo, right? So I know the big good cool game for me was Lords of Thunder. I really loved the music on it. I mean, it wasn't really that good as a shooting game, but definitely the music, I just was really phenomenal. And I think that's one of the things that really turned me on about the Turbografx, is that certainly it had so much more than what the Sega CD was able to do, right? It really exploited the ability to have actual audio quality stuff at this time. And at this time, no other system had it, right? No other system had like recognizable dialogue, speaking, CD quality musical soundtracks and that kind of stuff. So that's what really appealed to me. In terms of that, anime games that was really big was, for example, Line Greaser. That one was really, I mean, sure, I've already played it for the Sega, for the Sega Genesis, right, as War Song. And I thought that game was fantastic, right? And then all of a sudden, they had this PC Engine version, and man, I totally fell in love with the music soundtrack, right? A lot more heavy guitar in that. I remember as soon as I got that was one of the first ones I bought all the game soundtracks. So I went out and tried to find the Langrisa soundtrack, and it's just the rearranged versions and that kind of stuff. It was just so impressive to me. And still to me one of the best arranged soundtracks I've heard for a game. So definitely Greaser was right around the top there. Other games I spent a lot of time playing was I played Lady Phantom. Literally that was like, it was literally like Bubblegum Crisis at the time, and or shall I say, kind of a Soul Bianca Bone Crisis type of thing, where and again, strategy, movement, and that kind of stuff. Very similar to a lot of the hex grid stuff that I love playing. The other sort of games I remember, sort of at least in terms of anime games, I would remember doing a lot of Macross. I remember playing like this again. This one is one of those games where again I didn't really understand how how the game really worked, but I fumbled through it and managed to figure out how to do the transformation modes and which modes were more effective against fighting different sort of different sort of mechs and encountering the difference in trotty and that kind of stuff. But yeah, definitely Macross was a really big one for me when I was playing that game. And the other one I really liked was Graduation. And again, Graduation was one of those ones where again I had to get someone like Daisuke to kind of help me translate the table. And then once I got the table sort of translated, then I basically looked at all the indicators. So basically every day when you update, when you get updated on the status of your students, I'd look at the little table, and if it says that for example, their strength is went down, then I'd look at the character and say, okay, strength. So make sure I give them a rest or whatever, or give them a break in their day, or if their grades went down or whatever, then I'd spend some time studying with them, or their happiness level was going down. So then maybe you go and buy them a gift or something. So there's all these little things that you had to just pay attention to the status of the game. In terms of what was going up and what was going down, and you just attended to the ones that went down, and then you basically you could change the effect of what those were. And as long as you kept them up, then certain things then you can get the outcome that you want, whether or not that is they graduate and they become basically a happy end for them, whatever, in terms of getting married or whatever, or maybe a ulterior motive of trying to get of them trying to get married with you, different things like that. That was the really cool sort of outcome thing of that game. And the funny thing is that I never really understood how that ending thing, like how the ending stamps work. I don't, remember how it was. It wasn't at the time. We never did take screenshots and that kind of stuff of my endings and that kind of stuff. I just remember that once in a while when I got the ending and happens that let's say Matt or Daisuke was around, and I asked him, okay, I got to the ending, and this is my sort of my teaching. As a teacher, this is my evaluation certificate or whatever, and then what can you translate what the stamp was, and then I remember one time that Matt said, yeah, you got the ranking of scum of the earth, kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, that means I must have got the good ending where I got married with one of the students. So yeah, that was I remember that was one of my fun games. But yeah, for the most part, the PC Engine, even at that time, in Japan and whatnot, they always referred to that as the otaku's game system, and I really believe that. It's the fact that if you had one of these systems, you were one of those outsiders, kind of like the outsiders, right? While everyone had the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, if you were the one that owned one of these, Turbografx or said PC Engine things, you were kind of aside from everyone else. But you had access to all the really cool anime games and that kind of stuff, which the other systems, did okay with, but for the most part, they were still copying arcade classics and that kind of stuff. Well, the PC Engine was really concentrating on some really good anime-backed sort of kind of games, and they said they had a lot of good ones, right? I can think of the things like Maze no Kaku and City Hunter and that kind of stuff, but I never really got into those ones as much as some of the ones that came out on CD, for example. Okay, but yeah, definitely a really great system. I hope you had that kind of fun and a little blast from the past, and don't forget, I'll be doing more kind of episodes where I bring up some pictures and more merchandise and collectible stuff from that past era. Okay, so until next time, see you again.